right, we're here with another episode of the BAT podcast. Today we have a super special guest and part of the BAT community. Mr. Jay Leno is with us. Jay, how are you?
Good, very good. Thank you.
We're so excited to have you. Howard, we're pretty lucky to get Jay to join us and for him to have a car live on the site right now.
I'm excited. Yeah, it's the first car I've sold in 30 something years. Sometimes I'll donate cars, to a veterans group or something, but it's the first time I actually sold something. So it's interesting.
It's a little nerve wracking on BAT. You get everybody chiming in with their opinions, but
that's okay. I bought my my P90 back in 15 with the ludicrous mode. It was the fastest thing you get. And then I drove a Plaid and I went, oh my God, the new Plaid is it's just crazy. You realize, okay, this is the future. I mean, I've got a 4-door sedan that's faster than a Bugatti Chiron. And it doesn't make any sense, but it's ridiculous, but it shows you the real reason. I bought the car because it's I bought my 88 Turbo Bentley back in 1989. It was an 89 rather, I bought an 88. Because it was the fastest 4-door sedan you could get in America, the Bentley Turbo R. And then this is sort of the same deal. And for less money than that was back in 1989. It's interesting. When you look at what Tesla's done with these carbon rotor motors, I mean, they've invented a new type of electric motor. It's so funny with electric motors. I feel like my mom walking in the garage when the guys are talking about cam timing, because, I was at the drag strip with Tesla guys and the engineers that's how it's so magnets. I'm going, can I get you guys a drink? Because I can't even enter the conversation here because all my knowledge is useless. It's like I'm the best horseshoer in the country, but nobody has horseshoes anymore. Okay, and that's where it is, So it's fascinating to be on the cusp of this sort of changeover. And I think in the next 6 years, it's just going to be unbelievable.
Well, I actually had one of those Turbo Rs, and you'll go broke replacing the mineral oil, which is about $80 a quart, and the brake accumulators. But time will tell if Tesla batteries are more or less reliable than 80s Bentleys. We'll see.
Well, I think they are. My P90 has lost maybe 2%. I mean, I charge mine the right way. I charge it every day to about 80%, 85%. For this sale, I charged it up to 100%, and it went to 268, which is exactly what it did when I got it. So if you maintain it and take care of it properly, I've only used the supercharger once. You don't want to do that too much. I think that can damage the batteries. But if you're careful with it, and I drive it hard. I mean, I've been through 3 sets of tires and 23,000 miles. So I drive it hard. But battery wear doesn't seem to be a problem. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So just to give a little color to people who are listening, like Jay has a blue Tesla Model S, which was the top of the line 90 D, I think, model.
Right.
In 2015, and you replaced it with, I think, almost the same color of the brand new 2021 model.
Right.
And then the old one we're selling on BAT right now, and that's actually probably going to close in the next, whatever it is, another day before
tomorrow. Yeah.
Before this goes up. So you're going to get to experience the final minutes of a BAT auction for the first time, which is a sort of an interesting experience. But you touched on something that I think is interesting. You said you never sell a car. This is your first car you've sold in 30 something years. Like,
right.
Why is that? What is it about you? Are you just way better at buying than selling, or you don't want the hassle, or what's the deal?
Well, the interesting thing is I'm not as emotionally attached to my P90 because it doesn't need me. It never needed me. It doesn't break. It doesn't, when you take a car apart and you put it together, it's like a bond that you have with it, whether it's my Hudson Hornet or whatever. You just feel, when a car breaks down and you're able to get it home yourself, this is pretty good. You feel like you've done so. We live in I'm in show business, which is subjective. Some people think you're funny. Some people think you suck. I mean, there's not much you can do about it. You can't make somebody laugh if they don't think it's funny. That's fine. But when something's broken and you fix it, nobody can say it's not fixed. An engine wasn't running. Now it is. Oh, okay. There's a great deal of satisfaction in that. I mean, I can write a joke and tell it, and somebody laughs and somebody doesn't. So I go, I love that joke. Someone goes, I didn't think it was funny at all. And they're both right, you know. But when you take something and get it to operate the way it's supposed to, there's a great deal of satisfaction in that. So yeah, like I have no compulsion selling my P90 because it's exactly as it was when I bought it, except it has 23,000 miles on it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And so when you tend to buy things a lot more than you sell them, you tend to accumulate a few things. And I think a lot of people know you as, you know, Jay on the Tonight Show and Jay knows Garage and these sort of things. And people in the car world know that you're a diehard car guy. And then you have this, you know, garage full of cars. And so I'd love to delve into, I think what people don't know.
Motorcycles. Yeah.
And motorcycles, right. And like, why do you have all these? What on earth are you doing with them? Is your plan to let that grow and grow and grow? Or have you reached this sort of wonderful equilibrium? Or like, what is behind all of that stuff?
I had no idea my mom would be interviewing me. Why do you have all these cars? I didn't know why you have them all. I thought this was a car site, but okay. I thought
well, 350 or what's the number up to, man? I mean, how many are we talking?
Well, there's 200 cars registered and 168 motorcycles.
Okay, so we'll call it in the 300. So not trying to mom you here, but I mean, that is a little outside the norm, right? Can I get that at least?
Well, let me ask, well, you know something? My wife loves this show, Hoarders, and I watch it and I go, the guy seems fine, honey. I mean, there's still a passageway to get from the bedroom into the living room. It's not like there's not a little alleyway through there. You can get around the magazines. I think this guy is fine. What's wrong with this show? So to me, the show makes perfect sense. Well, you know, I just collect cars instead of old newspapers. But yeah, it's you know, it's funny when you're interested in something, you always want to know what came before that. And like if you like muscle cars, you get a few muscle cars and you go, what came before the muscle car? Well, what came before the muscle cars were big cars with muscle, like the Chrysler Hemis from the 50s, the beginning. And what came before that? The Buick valve and head. What came before that? Well, then steam engine. So you just want to, you know, the fun thing about this hobby is if we were Egyptologists, our hobby would be 5,000 years old. But the whole history of the car world doesn't go back much more than maybe 150 years, and that's stretching it. So you can encompass almost all of it. So I find that fascinating.
Well, that's, you know, my dad had a saying, which was, we're all just one car away from true happiness. And you seem to embody that quite a bit. You just touched on something I really wanted to ask you about as it relates to pre-war cars. I mean, you know, Jay, I don't think there's too many people out there that have both a Hispano Suiza and a McLaren F1.
Right.
So that's probably a rarefied group. But you've got some really neat pre-war stuff. I mean, Bentleys and Duesenbergs and your collection. Are the great pre-wars kind of what really captured your attention when you started collecting, or the point you just made about always wondering what came before? I think our audience would love to know about kind of where your interest is rooted and where it all started.
Well, I always liked technology that was ahead of its time. In its time, I like noble failures. I like people that built things that were really much better than anybody needed. So consequently, nobody could afford it. Nobody bought it. I mean, the Duesenberg would be a good example of that. The Duesenberg was a 7-liter twin cam, 4-valve engine in 1928. I mean, the speed limit was still 45 miles an hour. 100 miles an hour then was like 200 miles an hour now. I mean, a Model T Ford had a top speed of maybe 44 miles an hour if you were really pushing it, and you couldn't hold that for very long. So the idea that anybody needed something that was over the top, that's what I like about Elon with the Plaid. It's a ridiculous car that is so fast, but yet there's a need, you know, to keep pushing the envelope. You know, Duesenberg went out of business because basically the cars were too good. It was way more car than anybody needed. 4-wheel hydraulic brakes before anybody else, and like I said, 4 valves, twin cam. I mean, to set the valves on a Duesenberg is a 40-hour job. It's a full week of 8 hours a day with shims and bucket and doing that whole thing. It's crazy. But back then, technology was expensive and labor was cheap. So you could build these labor-intensive vehicles and pay a guy 50 cents a day, and then you were fine. So I enjoy. It's so funny when you read about supercars back in the 30s. If you drove one, you'd be disappointed because cars today are so superior in terms of. I'll give you a perfect example. Tim Allen and I, we found for my show, we found a 67 GTO tri-power with automatic, but all the performance options. And I said, let's race it against just a regular mom car. So we found a Nissan Altima V6 automatic, and the Altima blew the doors off the GTO. The GTO sounded good and made all the right noises and ate gas and did all those things, but it still got its doors blown off by the Altima. So you realize how far car technology, what used to be fast. When I was a kid, 1966, the Hemi Coronet came out, and that did 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds. And people thought, well, it's got to be a typo. It can't be that fast. That's crazy. Well, the new Tesla Plaid goes 0 to 60 in just a hair under 2 seconds. So it's just amazing how fast it goes. So I forgot the original question. What was I probably got off topic here. What was the original question?
No, you've answered it perfectly. This was
okay.
This is what this is all about.
Oh, okay.
So jumping from there, you talk about technology in the cars and setting valves on the Duesenbergs and stuff. I was talking to Howard before we got you in, and I was kind of talking about there's the parking area of your garage, and then there's the workshop. And then obviously you get your cars out some. And I want to talk about the workshop because you guys are doing some interesting things. But your ideal part and taking part in the car hobby today is what? Is yourself out on PCH with nobody bothering you? Or it's all your buddies, trying to figure out the valves on a pre-war car, or it's, driving them that are over in the garage side? What's sort of the ideal day for you?
Well, luckily we don't live in communist China, so I don't have to pick just one. I can have all of those things. And that's really what it is. The fun part is sharing the stuff. I drove one of these BAC monos. You ever see that thing? Yeah. And I didn't like it because it was one seat. And I thought, to me, half the fun of having this stuff is sharing the experience. That's really the whole thing. Every now and then I'll get a letter from an old guy like me who read about Duesenbergs, and never even saw one. So I invite them to the garage and I take them for a ride, and I just enjoy seeing their reaction to, what it's like to experience it. The fun thing about having this Tesla Plaid is you can put 3 people in it and blow off a 911 like it's nothing, and people are stunned. So, it's really all of that. It's really the shared experience. It's the idea of fixing something and then taking it out and road testing it. To me, the car I love driving the most is the last one we just worked on. I've got a project ahead of me right now. We just blew up the engine in the Chrysler Turbine car. It was, there's only 2 of these in private hands. There are no parts. There's nothing. So we've got to just struggle to figure out how to make these pieces using 3D printing and whatnot, and figure out what the alloy is in the motor. And it's pretty, it's going to be a pretty intense project. But when I got the Chrysler Turbine car, all I did was just drive it. It didn't need much. And what happened was it's got a thing called regenerators in it, which circulate the heat. Well, the regenerator kind of locked up, and then the heat just burned through the regenerator, literally melted the inside. You're looking at 3,000 degrees here. And so we opened it up. But the fun part is taking it apart and opening it up. I always believe the heart is healthiest when the head and the hands work together. So during the day, I like to work with my hands, and at night I go out and I tell jokes and do stuff like that. And it's fun. It makes you appreciate hard work. I have so many friends in show business that go, they want me to go there for 10 grand. I'm like, what else are you doing on a Tuesday that's worth 10 grand? Just shut up. just go do it. Because, when you take your transmission out and your hands are all bloody and covered with grease, and you realize some guy probably just made $80 for the day doing that, it makes you appreciate your life a little bit more in your job, if that makes any sense.
That makes a ton of sense. When I was at your garage, you were trying to pull out your Mercedes sedan, your 6'3" sedan, and you were having trouble with it. So you ended up to your elbows underneath that car, yanking on things up underneath the engine compartment. And it looked like you were actually genuinely enjoying fighting that car and trying to get it to drive you home.
Well, I think there's a great deal of satisfaction in getting something to operate properly. I mean, life for most people is pretty frustrating. How many things in your life can you actually control? You have a trouble with the tax franchise board or whatever it might be. There's really nothing you can do here. But you can take something that's broken, work on it, and get it to go. I mean, that 6.3 that you're talking about, that car has 326,000 miles on. And I change the oil and I replace parts when necessary. And it'll last the rest of my life. I mean, a car can last your whole life if you take care of it and maintain it. That's what's kind of fun about that thing. Yeah, extremely complex. Well, it's so funny because when I was a kid, I had a 34 Ford with a V8. And a friend of mine came over, this is in the 60s, with a new Mustang. We opened the hood of that Mustang and I went, oh my God, I can't imagine working on this thing. It looks so complicated. Well, now when I open the hood of 65 Mustang, it couldn't be simpler. I go, oh my God, this is nothing. And then I don't even talk about fixing the Tesla, please. I couldn't tell you what to do there without getting electrocuted. So yeah, there's a great deal of fun. Just putting it all in perspective.
Jay, last week we were talking to the head of the RPM Foundation, talking about the future of classic car restoration and finding young people to replace kind of the aging old guard of all the people who are working on this stuff. How do you think about an approach keeping your collection going? I mean, obviously you need to drive cars to keep them from decaying, but we'd love to hear about your whole maintenance.
Well, yeah, there's a college in Kansas. It's called McPherson College. And they have a degree in automobile restoration. I've set up a couple of scholarships there, one under Fred Duesenberg's name, I think one or two under my name, where kids get this is the only country in the world where to be a mechanic, you just say, I'm a mechanic, and people believe you. You can't say, I'm a doctor, and people believe you. But for some reason, they do that with it. I mean, there's a shop here in Burbank that has my favorite sign. It says, we specialize in all makes of cars. They specialize in everything. Their specialty is everything, which just makes me laugh. I just, and so to me, like McPherson College, when you graduate from there, we've had graduates go to the Mercedes-Benz Center, the Classic Center in Germany, Jaguar Classic, GM Heritage, automobiles now. This is a great time. You actually have more and more. When I was a kid, you went to a car show, and a guy would show up at a Duesenberg with 3 black wall tires and 1 white wall truck tire and win the show because he was the only one that even had tires that could get to the show because there was nothing available. You just had to find old tires in a junkyard and put them on your car and hope they didn't disintegrate. Now everything's available. It's cars are finally being seen as kinetic artwork, as rolling sculpture. And, you see them in museums now. I mean, guys that go to work for the Classic Center, they make $100 an hour, because they're specialists. They have a 4-year degree. Your parents don't have to break down in tears anymore when you say you want to be a mechanic. I mean, I got a friend of mine that runs a transmission shop, and that's all he does. And he must make $250,000, $300,000 a year. He's got like 30 people working for him because for some reason we live in this world now where pressing a keyboard and getting carpal tunnel syndrome somehow seems preferable to actually working with your hands and making something. And it's rather discouraging, but I'm not discouraged at all. I find when I was a kid, a lot of guys would fake interest in cars because it was a way to meet girls, because cars were part of the culture. Songs like 409, Little GTO and all that. So they didn't know anything about cars, but they pretended. These days, I find kids either know nothing about cars or they are just unbelievable experts. I mean, I meet young people now that can just know everything. And we live in an age of specialization. People like focus on one thing. And we have, for example, there are mechanics now that only do Ford GTs. Guy named Tony works for Ford. He travels the country and just fixes every Ford GT. Porsche Carrera. I've got a Porsche Carrera GT. There's 1,260 of them built, I think, out of 1,500 that's supposed to be built. And there's a couple of guys, and they're like heart surgeons. They go around the country and they know these cars inside out. So I think the health of the hobby is very good and will continue to do well, because these cars still bring huge money. The recent auction results, well, you guys can speak to this. It's crazy. I mean, cars are going for, especially cars, the classics have fallen somewhat, the cars from the 50s, but that's fine. It's a bit like music. There's rock and roll and there's rap. You can like one and hate the other, but it's all still music. So I'm very hopeful. I think with colleges like McPherson and you're getting specialists that can do these cars and fix part and 3D printing. Okay. I mean, when I first got into steam cars, they're wonder parts. You would buy cars. There were remnants of cars and just hope you found parts one day. Now you can replicate every single part. And it's really amazing. You can't tell them from the originals.
I saw that big 3D printer when we were in your garage, and it seemed like sort of a staple. It was right there in the middle of everything that you had going on, and it seemed like maybe that was going to be a new area of focus, or maybe you were experimenting with it. But
that thing is, for example, I have this Merlin powered 34 rolls with 27-liter Merlin aircraft engine in it. We wanted to run it on Weber carburetors. So we 3D printed our own intake manifold. And now it's running on Weber. There's no Weber intake manifold for a 27-liter Merlin V8, but now there is. We made one. And if anybody wanted one, I would certainly share the dimensions with them and they could print up their own. We can make parts for steam cars. You can make cylinder, you can make anything. And it's really good. There's no reason to throw out any part anymore, no matter how worn out. I mean, there's a company up here in Temecula called Lock and Stitch. And we had a 1913 Christie fire engine, which was a front wheel drive, 4-cylinder fire engine. And the rod came through the side of the block. And the hole was big enough for me to actually stick my head in. It was that big. I mean, the size of a football helmet. We sent it to them and they stitched it back together, not using heat or nothing to cause distortion. So the technology now is amazing to resurrect and fix just about anything. And when you look at that block, you cannot even see where the rod came through. Yet we managed to save the original block with the original numbers. It's still the original block. It's just been repaired instead of thrown out. So the future actually looks very bright for the antique car hobby, because finally restorers are being treated with respect. They're not just grease monkeys or mechanics, I mean, when I was a kid, my dad was these old car nuts. He would call them nuts because why would you pay more for an old car when my dad would, you could buy a new Cadillac for that. Why would you buy a 32 Ford? You got a brand new Cadillac. It didn't make any sense to him because he was born in 1910, but to me, I totally get it. So I think even from an investment point of view, old cars make sense. McLaren F1 is the classic example. I bought that back in 98 or 99. It was $800,000. People, you're out of your mind. You're crazy. That's stupid. I thought, well, I like it. I'm doing good. I'm going to buy it. No, you're going to lose your shirt. That's the most idiot. Well, the last offer I got was $17,500,000 and one sold for $24 million at Monterey. So yeah, I mean, the trick is if you're reasonably knowledgeable and you like it, other reasonably knowledgeable people will like it too. And most likely will go up in value, especially stuff they're not making anymore. I don't get paying big money for a brand new car still in production like a C8 or a Viper at the time, because they'll make as many as they need to sell. But in McLaren's case, there were 64 road cars. That's all they built. They're not going to build anymore. So if you want one, the price is just going to keep going up. I had a friend of mine, when I bought mine, he bought one too. And 2 years later, he got offered $1.3 million. And he thought, well, that's great. I got to sell it. I don't want to sell it, but I got to sell it. Well, now he's kicking himself because one went for $24 million, which is ridiculous.
No,
go ahead, Howard.
It's like the old saying, new cars are for people who can't afford old cars, right? But I just want to go back real quick to the 3D printing, because I think people would be curious. I mean, you said you use that printer to produce this highly specialized pre-war intake manifold, and just bam, it prints it, and you bolt it on and it works? Or is there more refinement needed, or how plug and play does that process actually come out to be?
Well, I mean, there's a little bit of work involved. It'll build exactly what you input, so make sure your inputs are correct. We have a thing called the Faro arm, which scans it in a 3D way and gives it all the proper measurements, and you make it about 1% bigger to allow for shrinkage. They have 3D printers that print in metal now. Mine still prints in plastic, and then we use that as the mold, and we send that out and have it made. But yeah, there's no part you can't make. I mean, it's amazing. You can put in a complex part like the back of a clock. It'll make all the pieces without even disassembling the clock, and it will work. I mean, it's fascinating. We've made everything. We've made water pumps. I bought a car, a 1914 Premier, from a guy who bought the car in the late 70s, and it needed a water pump. And he thought, well, he'd find one. Well, he had it for 30 years and he never found a water pump. So I bought it from him pretty cheap. We bought it back here. We took the old water pump, we scanned it. Places where there was porosity, we built it up with extra metal on the 3D printing process. Took the water pump, had it made, and it's on the car now, and it runs fine. And it looks like the original water pump. It even has the original numbers that the original water pump had. The original water pump was all corroded and eaten away and had porosity problems. But we're able to scan it and make it bigger, stronger than it was.
That's amazing. I get angry if I can't find a water pump in 3 weeks, like I was looking for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, one of those things, they go, I'll find one. Well, there weren't any. Because, see, it's different. It's not like the old days. What they do now is, when they get V8 engines, junkyards, I believe, are required to crush them or put a hole in the block to make them useless, so they can't be used again. So, but if you can find one, they used to be, you go to a junkyard now and there's rarely anything past 2013. It's all modern stuff. Everything else has been crushed and sold for scrap, So this is why 3D printing will save the day.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Shifting gears a little bit, I'd love to hear a little bit about your sort of inspiration in this world, or any heroes or people that you admire that are doing things in the car world. I may not let you say Elon. You've given him the 1.9 0 to 60, but anybody else that's being innovative in the classic car world or the new car world that you really sort of look up to and think are doing it right?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of people out there. I am not an engineer or anything like that. I'm not even a very good mechanic. I just enjoy working on the stuff and I like it. So I'm enamored of anybody. I hate these car shows where they try to trash a car or break a car. It's really hard to produce an automobile. The average car has 10,000 parts. So assuming you're not making each one yourself, you're relying on all these different suppliers. And it's a tough business. You're only as good as your last model. So whenever I get something, I'm amazed at what General Motors has been able to do, how they can produce a C8 Corvette for $62,000. It would cost you $20,000 to paint it. So it's pretty amazing. Taj Jukner is the chief engineer for Corvette. I had a funny experience with him. We went to Milford Proving Ground, and I thought, let's go 200 miles an hour in a Corvette. This was in 2019. It was the last ZR1. So we pulled one off the line, and I called Taz. I said, "Do you want to ride with us?" Said, "Yeah, okay." So we get there and get the brand new Corvette. And, he gets in the driver's seat. I said, "You ready to go?" I said, "Okay." So I said, "Tell me about the first time you went 200 miles an hour in a Corvette." He goes, "Oh, I never have." I said, "You never have? So your first time going 200 miles an hour in a Corvette is with a comedian who's never been on the track before, who's 70 years old. Is that what you're telling me?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, all right, let's do it." And we did about 50 laps at 204 miles an hour. And here's the amazing part. Back in 2005, I went to Talladega with our Carrera GT. And we did, I don't know if it was quite 100 laps, but it's close to that at 190 miles an hour. You just wanted to see how many laps you could do at 190 miles an hour. And at 190, boy, that Porsche Carrera, and that was set up by Norbert Singer. It was walking around, it was at 190. I go into the banking and I'd feel the tires. I mean, I could feel myself just inching. I said, "Boy, this is scary as crap. This is unbelievable." So just 190, 100. Okay. And then as I'm coming down the back straight, the guy gives me the thumbs up, and then the slash across the neck, like you can cut it. I said, "Oh, okay." And I lifted off the throttle, and boom, the back end came around and did about 8 spins, rolled down the center of the track. I mean, luckily I was able to avoid hitting the wall, because that old adage, you'll always hit where you're looking at. So every time I saw the wall, I cut the wheel. And every time the wall came up, I kept cutting the wheel. So I managed to stay in the center of the track and just flat spot all the tires without damaging the car. Yet, 15 years later, in the Corvette, for a tenth of the price of that Carrera GT, we're able to do 204 miles an hour for 50 laps. Rock steady. I mean, the aerodynamics, the suspension, everything is that much improved in just a decade and a half. And I thought that was pretty amazing technology. So the fact that we're able to make these cars, and I look at the C8, I figured, oh, it would have just a torque converter transmission. No, it has a dual clutch, a magnesium, aluminum frame. I mean, all the trick stuff that you find in McLarens and Ferraris. I know there's more trick stuff in those, but I mean, they're 3 to 4 times the price of the Corvette. So the fact that American manufacturing is able to do it for that amount of money, I find quite impressive.
That is so great. So when you got behind the wheel of the Vet at Milford, did you look over to the guy and tell him, "Hey, the last time I did this, I was pirouetting through the infield at 190 miles an hour"?
No, I didn't mention that, but no, I didn't seem like a smart thing to bring up at the time.
I love talking about sort of unsung models, as you know, on BAT. Like, we love featuring weird stuff, not necessarily expensive stuff, just
Right.
like unusual enthusiast stuff. We had Bob Lutz on the podcast, who I know you probably know is an interesting character. And he started talking about Opel GTs, which I just think is so poetic that a big executive will sit and talk to us for seemingly a full hour on his experience with a, $3,000 car or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, the Opel GT was a pretty good car. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Lutz is the guy, who came up with the slogan, "the ultimate driving machine" for BMW. I mean, he knows his stuff. He's a real car guy, and because, as you know, just a really funny character. Before I got my Chrysler Turbine car, a friend of mine named Frank Lutz, he owned the one from Harris, but the engine was not operable. And I called up Bob Lutz and I said, "Hey, Bob, a friend of mine's got a turbine car. He doesn't have an engine. You got any spare turbine engines left over?" And he goes, "Let me check." And he called me. He goes, "Yeah, there's one here." I said, "Okay, how much you want for it?" "I'll send it to you." "Oh, thanks." So he sent it to me, and then I gave it to Frank, and and he put it in the car. That was before I had mine. I still would have saved it for myself. But yeah, that's the kind of guy he is. Real car guy, very nice guy, very funny.
Yeah, the parallel there, I was just going to ask you, like, I know there's cars that people associate with you all the time, either through your videos or whatever reason, right? Whether it's the Red Gullwing or the Shogun or the Mazda Cosmo, the ones that a lot of people have seen you publicly with. But are there any sort of unsung or sort of dark horse models that people wouldn't have thought are, favorite of Jay Leno that
Well,
are
I love,
scene?
I've got about 3 Panards, which is, Panard is a French car
Yep.
that was actually better than the Volkswagen. It's just the French, they don't, you want to buy one, buy one. We don't care. It's that attitude. They didn't know how to market it. I mean, the Panard is an air-cooled twin cylinder, 850cc. It's got torsion bar valve springs. It's twice the power of a Volkswagen with half the number of cylinders and half the displacement. Well, a little more than half the displacement. And better car than the Volkswagen, smoother, faster. It's just, to the French, if you own the Shell station, you want to be a dealer. Yeah, sure, you can be a dealer. It wasn't set up. The Germans have that precision thing going. But the Panard is a fascinating car. Just the way you literally unbolt the engine, lift it out of the front, and then put on your workbench and work on it. I mean, the exhaust pipes are the motor mounts. The exhaust pipes, you tighten them in the way you would an exhaust pipe, and then they connect to a rubber piece, which is this. Which, I mean, it's the French think completely different. Everybody around them builds cars traditionally, and I think it has to do with the fact that French cars always seem to be built in Paris. Something about romanticism and intellectualism and all that kind of stuff. And the French just do everything different. I mean, the English, the Spanish, the Germans, they all do 5mm. They do like 6mm, 8mm, 10mm. The French do 5mm, 7mm. Like on a French car, you pull the light switches out to turn them off. So the number of dead batteries I've had from driving these things. So I go, oh, or people walk by and go, oh, your lights are on. I saw the switch. I pushed it in. No, you just turned it on. No, I mean, everything is different. They're just so odd. Just the French think so differently, but they don't really care about performance times. It's all about luxury and comfort. I mean, I've got a Citroen DS and a Citroen SM. They are the most comfortable driving cars. I mean, they're just unbelievable. I don't know why Rolls-Royce does not have Citroen seats in them, because people sit in that car and they go, oh my God, this is so comfortable. I can't believe this. I go, well, yeah, you need to experience it, I mean, that's what my garage is all about, just getting unusual driving experiences, because everything now is the same. When I was a kid, it was fun. You had everything from push button transmissions to weird, like on the Hudson, it's on the column. And to start the car, you pull the shift lever towards you. It's like nobody can steal this car because you can't figure out how to start it. You pull it towards you, and then it's that's how you start this thing. So I just like anything that's different or unusual than the norm.
We had Graham Rahal on the podcast a few months back. He was telling us about how David Letterman is a partner in his IndyCar team. David's a car enthusiast. You had mentioned your buddy Tim Allen. Seinfeld, obviously well known in the Porsche world. I think of, like, back in the day, Gary Cooper driving around in his SSJ Duesenberg. So what is it about car culture and show business that goes so well together? Is that an LA culture thing, or what do you make of it?
Well, I think if you're in show business, you're probably a bit of an extrovert, Well, I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I worked at a place called Foreign Motors in Boston. We sold foreign cars, Rolls-Royce, Mercedes-Benz, Bentley, Peugeot, everything. One day we got a red Corniche convertible in, and it sat in the showroom for almost 18 months. Just couldn't give it away. The boss said, send it to LA, and it sold in 2 weeks. Because the idea of driving a red Rolls-Royce in Boston was like, Boston was so much, especially then, old money instead of new money. So the idea of driving a red Rolls-Royce convertible, that's preposterous, But in LA, oh my God, a red Rolls-Royce. Yeah, it sold in 2 weeks, which really made me laugh. And that sort of explains it, Duesenbergs were not quiet like Packards or even Pierce Arrows. They were loud and fast and a bit raucous. So, anybody that was a bit of an extrovert or in show business, or, a lot of times when you see stars standing next to Duesenbergs, people think Jimmy Cagney owned one. He didn't, but they would let a star borrow a car for the week if they could take their picture next to it. The same thing they do nowadays. So that's why you see a lot of stars with cars that they never really owned.
We were talking French cars. I got to bring a French car on your show, and we drove it around a little bit. That was definitely a super highlight for me, bringing the Renault down there and figuring out how not to leave the lights on. But tell us about your show. I mean, you have the next like 500 cars lined up for these drive arounds you're going to do on Jay Leno's Garage and recording these things, or is that going to be, what's the plan?
Well, what I do is just something called street grab. I'm driving around and I see an interesting car, and people go, "Oh, Jay Leno." So they kind of recognize me from being on TV. I go, "Hey, I love this. You want to put it on the show?" And they go, "Sure." And so they come. I did that the other day. A guy had a 240Z. I think it's on the website right now. And he cut the roof off it and made it convertible and put a 350 Chevy in it and all this kind of stuff. But it looked great. It had a nice stance. It seemed to handle and drive well. And that's sort of the fun part. It's funny. I mean, the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris, those do well. But the ones that really get the big viewing numbers are the B210 Datsun, a guy modified, or, just regular cars that regular people have. And it's fun. My attitude is anything that rolls, explodes, and makes noise is fun. And that's what we look for. Just any kind of interesting cars. I buy the story as much as I buy the car. I mean, that's what makes it. My favorite one was, I have a 53 Hudson Hornet, and a nice original car. And not all original, we restored it, but original specs and great driving car. And this old lady calls me one day, and she's 94 years old, and she's telling me the story. Her and her husband bought this brand new 51 Hudson Hornet in New Jersey, and they moved to California with their kids. And he came here to open a gas station. That's when, you could, lead a normal life in California for a reasonable amount of money. And they drove across country, and it's the only car they had. He died in 96. This was back in the early 2000s. And the car's sitting in the garage, but I buy it. And I said, well, I got a 53 Hudson. Oh, well, just come look at it. Oh, okay. So I go out to see her, and she's 94, no hearing aid, no glasses. And she takes me in the garage, and the thing's sitting there with 4 flat tires. She's got one of those California dusters, She'd go, would you buy it? I wanted to go to a good home. I said, well, I don't really need it. All right, okay. All right, I'll buy it. So I gave her $5,000 for the car, which I thought was a little more than it was worth, but that's okay. So I get it home here at the garage, and we start restoring it. It took about 2 years to paint it, So I think, gosh, she's 94. I wonder if she's still alive. So when the car's finished, I call her up, and I go, hello? And she goes, hello. Oh, this is Jay Leno. Oh, Jay. I said, listen, the car's all restored. You want to come for a ride? Oh, well, yeah, okay. I got to get my hair done. I got to get my hair done. And she said, can I bring my kids? Can the kids come? I said, yeah, sure. Well, the kids were 72 and 74. Okay. But she's 96. So I drive out there, and the kids have got a blindfold on her, and she's standing in the driveway when I pull in, and she's touching the car and going around. Oh, the paint feels so shiny. And I said, well, take the blindfold off. And she sees it. It's all, restored, and the chrome's been redone. Oh, and she just starts crying. So I said, you want to go for a ride? She said, let's go for a ride. I put the kids in the back. So the 2 kids get in the back, 72 and 74-year-old. So her and I are talking, and she's telling me stories about Route 66 and the big teepee and all this kind of stuff. And as we're talking, the 2 kids in the back start poking each other, like just playing, poking each other. And she turns around and it's just slapping the crap out of him. She goes, I told you kids that Mr. Leno's taking us riding, you behavior. And she's whacking him as hard as she can. I can hear the slaps, and the 3 of them are just dying laughing over it. I told you kids, you behave. This is Mr. Leno's car, and I can't take you kids anywhere. And you just yelling at, and they're just having the time of their life, and it was just great. She finally passed away, I think, at 104 or something like that. but it was just a great memory, you know. So that's what makes the car fun, when you have those kind of stories. You know, it was the only car they had, and the two kids told me that when they were in high school, they were so ashamed their dad was driving this 1951 car in the 60s that they would drop the kids off like 3 blocks from school, and the kids would walk the rest of the way so the other kids wouldn't see their dad was driving this old car, you know. It just those kind, and to me, that's what makes it fun. You know, it really makes it a fun car to have, and it's a fun story to tell.
That's a great story. I love it.
I love all of that. One, your street grabs. I'm just picturing you cruising around, you know, Burbank and Riverside looking for cars you want to put on the show, and then also apparently you're taking cold calls from 94-year-old ladies trying to sell you their 51 Hudson. So that's pretty neat, Jay.
Oh yeah, I meet a lot of people like, you know something, there are a lot of guys like me that don't have kids, and they want their car to go to a good home, and they want it to somebody's, you know, nobody wants to sell something and then see it 2 weeks later for 3 times the money at an auction and realize, oh, they got taken, you know. So what I do is I always put the owner's picture up wherever the car is parked in the garage. And, you know, a lot of times people call and the grandkids come to see grandpa's old car. And I've got a bunch of cars like that. So that's kind of fun.
I think it's great. Well, we hope we are contributing positively to that. You know, on BAT, we like the story as well. And we try to include as many stories as possible and as much depth as we can on listing so many cars. Even
that's what makes it fun. That's why I bought my Falcon off of BAT, because it was just, you know, it's an enthusiast site. So the cars are owned by enthusiasts. There's nobody, you know, selling a picture of a car saying never seen snow, and it's across the middle of a snowstorm and the picture is taken. You know, people just lie blatantly to your face, you know, no rust. And then you see just a huge, you know, and the fact that the cars are well documented. So I bought a couple of cars and I've never had any problem at all actually with it. It's been good because I think it's like-minded people. Like on my Tesla, I replaced everything that was scratched or pieces of trim because I just wanted to be perfect because it's going on BAT, and I think you guys have a certain reputation that way. So,
yep, absolutely. Well, you contribute to that, and people love seeing you around and are excited to see the Tesla. And so we just want to thank you for that involvement over the years, but also for giving us an hour of your time right now. This was super fun to talk to you, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Hope we can do it some more in the future. So we'll sign off here for the BAT podcast. Another fun episode that we thank Jay. Howard, good to be with you as always, and we'll do it again next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.